You've probably felt it, that quiet shift when you realize you've been giving too much emotion, too much energy, too much attention to things that never truly saw you. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from doing too much, but from doing too little for yourself. And eventually, something in you snaps, but not in anger, in clarity. The realization hits. It's time to stop negotiating your worth in spaces that never required your depth. It's time to stop chasing and start building. The world is loud. People demand your presence, your reaction, your response. But the Stoic doesn't respond to noise. He responds to alignment. He doesn't move to impress. He moves to become. And in that becoming, everything changes. You stop explaining yourself. You stop overgiving. You stop waiting for someone else to see you, because now you see yourself. This isn't detachment, it's refinement. It's what happens when you decide to stop living by emotion and start living by principle. You begin to feel the power of stillness, the strength of boundaries, the clarity that comes when you stop proving and start embodying. That's Stoicism, not coldness, not suppression, but self-mastery in motion. A quiet fire that doesn't need to be seen to burn. And when you live like that, when your discipline becomes louder than your explanations, when your presence feels like intention, not effort, something shifts in how the world treats you. You stop being available to what drains you. You stop begging for what should be offered freely. You stop lowering your frequency just to feel included. This episode is not about strategy. It's about alignment. It's not about gaining control over others, but about reclaiming control over yourself. Because the moment you prioritize your principles, the world learns to prioritize you. 1. Control your emotions, or they will control you. It starts with a thought, a small reaction, something subtle, a slight offense, a glance that feels dismissive, a tone that stings more than it should. You brush it off, until you don't, until that emotion finds a space to grow. And suddenly, it's not small anymore. It floods your system, sharpens your tone, shapes your decisions. And by the time you realize it, your peace has already been spent. This is the quiet power of emotion left ungoverned, not because you felt too much, but because you didn't learn how to hold what you felt. The Stoics never denied emotion. They didn't preach suppression. They weren't cold or mechanical. What they practiced, and what made them powerful, was discipline, a deliberate relationship with feeling, a space between stimulus and response, a pause long enough to choose clarity over chaos. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength doesn't come from becoming emotionless. It comes from becoming emotionally sovereign, aware of the feeling, but not owned by it. Because every time you react from emotion alone, you give your power away, to the stranger who cut you off, to the comment that wasn't worth your breath, to the past you haven't fully released. You become a puppet, pulled by strings you never meant to tie. But when you slow down, when you observe instead of absorb, when you feel without flinching, that's when control returns. Not control in the rigid sense, but in the sense of rootedness. You stop being pulled. You start standing. And people notice it. They feel it. The person who controls their emotions commands presence, not by dominance, but by stability. While others react, you remain. While others explode, you examine. While others panic, you choose. This isn't easy, especially in a world that rewards outrage. A culture that teaches you to speak before thinking, to feel before understanding. But the Stoic doesn't follow that rhythm. He doesn't perform his pain. He studies it. He learns from it. He reclaims it. So when the emotion rises, and it will, pause. Sit with it. Ask it why it's here. Let it speak without letting it drive. And then respond. Not from habit, but from alignment. Because emotions aren't the enemy, but without discipline, they become the master. 2. Don't chase people. Focus on becoming. There's a moment in everyone's journey where they realize they've been chasing something outside of themselves. Affection, approval, closure, attention, all in hopes that someone or something will finally make them feel whole. It's a quiet moment, often shameful. You look at your messages, your memories, your efforts, and suddenly see how much of your life has been shaped by the pursuit of people who were never meant to be permanent. You tried to be enough for them. You made yourself smaller so they'd stay. You said yes when you wanted to say nothing at all. But in the process of chasing, you lost the very thing you hoped someone else would value, yourself. The Stoic doesn't chase, not because he doesn't care, but because he knows the cost. To chase someone is to say, "My worth depends on your presence." It's to hand your peace over and wait for them to return it. And the more you do that, the more distance you place between yourself and who you could have become if you had stayed rooted. There's a deeper truth here. When you chase, you abandon, not them, you. You step away from your own center to meet them where they're comfortable. You dim your light to match the shadows they haven't healed. You bend your boundaries just to keep them close. And all of that comes at a cost, because the energy you spend reaching for someone is energy you could have used to build something lasting within yourself. Carl Jung wrote about the journey inward, the process of individuation, where a person must separate from the collective, from the roles they were taught, from the patterns they inherited, and become something more whole. And part of that process is painful. You realize how often your identity was defined by what others wanted from you, by how well you fit, by how safe and lovable you appeared. But the soul doesn't want to fit. It wants to expand. And that expansion cannot happen when you're still trying to prove your worth through proximity. So what happens when you stop chasing? At first it's quiet, lonely even. You feel the pull, the urge to explain, to reach out, to fix the discomfort of being misunderstood. But then something begins to shift. Your energy settles. Your nervous system stops waiting. Your breath becomes yours again. You no longer revolve around someone else's orbit. You start to build your own. You pour into your work, your discipline, your presence. You take the energy you once used to seek others, and you invest it in becoming someone you can actually trust. Someone who doesn't flinch when others leave. Someone who doesn't collapse in the silence. Someone whose value is not on loan, but rooted. And here's the paradox. The more you stop chasing, the more magnetic you become. Not because you're trying to attract anyone, but because your alignment speaks louder than your words ever could. You're no longer trying to be impressive. You've become real. And realness is rare. Realness is powerful. The Stoic walks with quiet authority, not because he has all the answers, but because he no longer needs others to fill his silence. He doesn't perform. He doesn't persuade. He lives. He becomes. And those who are meant to walk with him will match his pace, not his pursuit. So if you've been running after someone, waiting for someone, trying to convince someone, pause, breathe, ask yourself, What part of me am I abandoning right now just to be chosen? And if the answer hurts, good, let it wake you up. Let it be the beginning of your return, because your life is not a stage for anyone else's attention. It is the sacred ground where your soul is meant to grow. And growth can't happen when you're stuck chasing shadows that were never meant to hold your light. So stop chasing, start building, and let your becoming be the thing that speaks for you. 3. Value your time more than your feelings. There's a trap almost no one sees, because it feels so personal, so justified, so emotional. You're hurt, so you explain. You're offended, so you defend. You're misunderstood, so you invest hours into proving a point. You play the whole conversation over in your head. You wonder what you could have said differently. You hold the tension in your chest, not because you enjoy it, but because you feel entitled to it. Because your emotions in that moment feel more important than anything else. But while you're lost in all that, time keeps moving. The day doesn't pause for your grudge. The hour doesn't wait while you craft the perfect reply. Your life doesn't slow down just because you decided to dwell. And without realizing it, you're trading the most finite thing you have, time, for the most temporary thing you feel. This is where the Stoic draws the line, not because feelings aren't real. They are. They matter. But not more than your time, not more than your life. You can feel something fully and still not let it dictate how you spend your hours. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." He wasn't denying pain. He was warning us about our relationship to it, about how we amplify it, carry it, marinate in it until it becomes a lifestyle. And while we're busy justifying the emotion, the resentment, the frustration, the outrage, life is quietly slipping away. You begin to grow when you stop assigning all your time to your feelings, not by suppression, but by prioritization. You learn to ask better questions. Is this worth the hour it will take to feel offended? Is this argument worth the mental fatigue it will leave behind? Is this relationship worth the endless cycle of emotional labor with no clarity in return? Most of the time, the answer is no. The Stoic doesn't dismiss emotion. He studies it. He respects it, but he doesn't worship it. He knows that time is the one thing you never get back, and spending it on every emotional ripple means you'll never have enough energy to build, to reflect, to live. So he learns to let things pass, not because he's numb, but because he's free. He doesn't need to fight every battle. He doesn't need to correct every misunderstanding. He doesn't need to be right when it costs him his peace. And that decision, to hold back, to walk away, to choose time over tension, is not weakness. It's maturity. It's self-mastery. There will always be someone who triggers you. There will always be a situation that stirs up anger, sadness, disappointment, but you get to choose. Will I give my limited time to this passing emotion, or will I hold space for it, learn from it, and keep walking forward? And over time, this choice becomes your power. You become someone who protects their focus, someone who doesn't leak energy into drama, someone who lives from a deeper rhythm where emotional waves are felt, but not followed. This is the real discipline, not avoiding feeling, but not bowing to it either, knowing when to express and when to detach, when to speak and when to walk away, when to feel it and when to free it. So the next time your emotions flare and the urge to react rises, pause. Ask yourself, if I spend the next hour here, will it build my life or just drain it? Because your time is sacred, and your feelings, while valid, aren't always worthy of it. 4. Say less, observe more. The world rewards noise. It praises the quick answer, the hot take, the clever comeback. You're expected to respond fast, speak loud, take up space, even when you don't know what you really think or why you're saying it. And if you pause too long, people get uncomfortable. Silence is treated like absence. Observation is mistaken for disengagement. But the Stoic knows something different. The one who speaks the least often sees the most. There's a kind of strength in quiet attention that most people overlook, not the silence that comes from fear, but the one that comes from discipline. When you stop trying to be heard and start trying to understand, your vision sharpens. You hear beneath the words. You see the patterns in behavior. You notice what's not being said and what that silence is trying to protect. Because when you're always talking, always reacting, always filling space, you're not learning, you're performing, you're living outward, not inward. You're managing impressions instead of developing perception. And that's why so many people feel unseen, scattered, misunderstood. Not because the world is too loud, but because they've never practiced the art of stillness. Epictetus taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, not just to listen more, but to reflect more, to slow the impulse, to wait for clarity before offering opinion, to separate what is real from what is reactive. But that kind of inner stillness is rare in a culture addicted to speed. When you begin saying less, something shifts inside you. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself in every conversation. You let the pause hang in the air without rushing to fill it. You stop trying to correct people who don't want to understand. You start reserving your voice for what actually matters. And the truth is, most people don't listen to understand. They listen to reply. But the Stoic listens to observe, to absorb, to see. He knows that every person reveals themselves if you're quiet long enough. The insecurities, the manipulations, the wisdom, the truth. It all rises to the surface when you don't interrupt it. This applies not just to people, but to life. When you speak less, you see more, in situations, in relationships, in your own reactions. You begin to notice your urges before they become actions. You watch your anger take shape without becoming its voice. You see your assumptions before they become judgments. This is presence. This is power. And that power grows. People begin to feel it. You become unpredictable, not because you're hiding, but because you're selective. Your words carry weight, not because they're many, but because they're measured. You're not cold. You're intentional. You're not passive. You're perceptive. So say less, not to disappear, but to deepen. Let others waste their energy trying to be heard in every room. You don't need the noise. You don't need the performance. You need awareness. And that's what silence gives you. Because when you stop talking to prove who you are, you create space to become who you are. 5. Discipline creates distance. There's something quiet about discipline. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg for recognition. It doesn't need to be posted or praised. But it creates a gap, a real one, a separation between you and who you used to be, between where most people stop and where you begin. That distance, it's earned and it's sacred. Discipline at first feels like limitation, like you're denying yourself ease, rest, comfort, pleasure. You wake early when no one's watching. You say no to distractions while others say yes. You train your mind to stay focused, even when it would rather scroll, complain, or wander. And for a while, it feels like you're missing out. But over time, that same discipline creates something else: freedom, space, clarity, a life built on structure instead of impulse. While others are pulled by mood, you are moved by values. While they react, you respond. While they chase dopamine, you build direction. And that separation grows. The Stoic doesn't seek distance from others out of superiority. He doesn't isolate out of pride. He simply walks with intention, and intention has a rhythm that not everyone wants to match. Most people live in cycles of reaction. They do what feels good in the moment, then wonder why their life feels scattered, hollow, anxious. But the disciplined person knows comfort is cheap, mastery has a price, and the price is repetition. Choosing what matters over what's easy, choosing silence over drama, choosing effort over excuse, choosing to live today in a way that earns peace tomorrow. Discipline creates distance, not just from people, but from your old self, the version of you that procrastinated, blamed, avoided, settled. That self begins to fade when you begin to rise. And yes, it's lonely sometimes. Yes, people will say you've changed, that you're too serious, too focused, too unavailable. Let them. You didn't come here to blend in. You didn't come here to make others feel comfortable while you abandon your own growth. You came here to rise, to move differently, to build something that lasts, not something that just looks good online. Discipline is the structure you build inside yourself so that you don't have to live at the mercy of chaos. It is the quiet contract between who you are now and who you're becoming. And the more you honor it, the less tolerance you have for anything that pulls you backward. This is where the real shift happens. You no longer need motivation. You move because it's who you are now. You don't negotiate with your excuses. You don't justify skipping the work. You simply show up because you said you would. And that distance, the one you used to fear, it becomes your edge, your protection, your peace. So if you feel the separation growing between you and the people who still live on impulse, between you and your past self, don't resist it. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. Discipline is doing what others won't now, so you can live how others can't later. That's the gap. And you don't need to apologize for being ahead. You just need to keep going. 6. Let silence make them wonder. You don't always need to explain. In fact, the more you grow, the less explaining you do. At some point in the journey, silence becomes more powerful than speech. Not because you don't have anything to say, but because you've learned the value of restraint, of stillness, of keeping certain truths inside until they've matured enough to no longer need an audience. In a world obsessed with noise, silence is provocative. People are uncomfortable with it. They expect answers, reactions, statements, justifications. But the Stoic doesn't respond on command. He doesn't reveal what doesn't need to be revealed. He doesn't perform transparency just to put others at ease. His silence isn't passive. It's principled. When you choose silence intentionally, it becomes your posture of strength. You stop trying to fill the void. You stop rushing to be understood. You stop negotiating your truth in exchange for momentary validation. And the beauty of that choice is this: people begin to wonder, not because you've hidden something, but because your energy no longer leaks. You've become unreadable in the best possible way. Marcus Aurelius himself was surrounded by politics, power, voices competing to be heard, yet his journal is filled with reminders to stay grounded in simplicity, in restraint, in inner reflection. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one. And in that spirit, the Stoic understands, Your presence is the message. Your silence, when chosen from strength, is not absence. It's density, it's pressure, it's weight. But silence is difficult, especially when you've lived most of your life being reactive, trying to explain your intentions, prove your goodness, fix misunderstandings. You've wasted hours responding to people who didn't even want the truth. They just wanted the last word. And in that cycle, you lost yourself. The shift happens when you realize that not every comment deserves your clarity. Not every provocation deserves your presence. Not every insult is an invitation to battle. Some things only survive because you respond to them. And when you withdraw your reaction, they die. This kind of silence isn't cold, it's strategic. It's the pause between who you were and who you're becoming. It gives you space to reflect, to choose your next move, to protect your energy before it's spent on something unworthy. Silence makes you harder to read, yes, but it also makes you harder to manipulate. And that's a power no one can take from you. People won't always like your silence. They'll accuse you of being distant, arrogant, or indifferent. Let them. That discomfort they feel. It's their mind trying to fill the blanks you've stopped offering. And that's not your responsibility. You're not here to soothe everyone's insecurity. You're here to rise. You'll find, over time, that silence protects what words often destroy. Your peace, your mystery, your ability to act from choice instead of compulsion. And when you do speak, it means something, because you've trained yourself not to speak from emotion, but from principle. So let them wonder why you didn't respond. Let them question your calm. Let them sit with the space you no longer fill with noise. Because your silence is not weakness, it's evolution. You've outgrown the need to be constantly available, constantly explaining, constantly performing. Now, your absence speaks, your stillness speaks, your restraint speaks. And what it says is simple. I no longer owe anyone a version of myself that costs me my peace. 7. If you can stay calm in chaos, you're already elite. There's a moment, and if you've ever truly grown, you've felt it, when everything around you is on fire. The plans fall apart, the people shift, the things you relied on crack under pressure, the voices get louder. The world demands a reaction. But instead of collapsing, you don't. You breathe, you observe, you wait. Not because you're numb, but because something in you has changed. This is the Stoic threshold, the place where ordinary people panic, but you choose to remain. Not frozen, not passive, but calm, present, anchored. It's easy to be centered when life is predictable, when the bills are paid, when the relationships feel stable, when your body is rested, when the sun is out. Anyone can look composed in peace. But chaos, real chaos, that's the test. It exposes what's real. It reveals whether your inner peace was a pose or a practice. The Stoic doesn't avoid storms. He walks into them prepared. He doesn't expect the world to be kind. He trains himself to remain kind when the world forgets how. He doesn't need the situation to be ideal in order to act with integrity. His response doesn't rise and fall with circumstances. It's shaped by principle, by habit, by clarity of purpose. And that's what makes calm so powerful, not because it looks impressive, but because it's earned. You only learn it by walking through chaos enough times without letting it change who you are. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not in retreat, but during wars, plagues, and betrayal. He ruled an empire while writing reminders to himself about staying calm, staying humble, staying present. Because even the most powerful man in the world knew, if you lose your inner state, you've already lost, no matter what the outside looks like. But here's what no one tells you. Staying calm doesn't always feel calm. Sometimes your heart races. Sometimes your thoughts spin. But calm isn't about feeling perfect. It's about not feeding the fire. It's about choosing to respond deliberately, even while your body is screaming for action. It's about mastering the pause before you speak, the breath before you act, the step back before you decide. And the world will notice, because most people move fast when things get hard. They panic, they project, they collapse inward or explode outward. So when someone moves through chaos slowly, with presence, they stand out, not as emotionless, but as elite. Not because they're better, but because they've trained for this. If you can hold your peace in the face of provocation, if you can maintain your values in the middle of loss, if you can think clearly while others shout, then you've already stepped into a different league, not of success, but of sovereignty. You won't always get it right. You'll lose your center sometimes, but every time you come back to it faster, you grow. Every time you observe instead of react, you strengthen. Every time you choose stillness over noise, you lead, even if no one sees it. So the next time chaos calls and everything in you wants to break, remember, you don't need to match the storm. You need to become the anchor. 8. Attention is power. Don't give it freely. Not everyone deserves a seat at the table of your mind. Not every thought deserves a second look. Not every distraction deserves a doorway. Yet most people hand out their attention like loose change, scrolling endlessly, reacting constantly, investing energy into gossip, comparison, anxiety, and drama, as if attention were infinite, as if it doesn't shape your entire reality. But it does. Where your attention goes, your life follows. And what you water with focus grows. The Stoic doesn't guard his attention out of fear. He guards it because he knows it's his most sacred asset. In a world where everyone is fighting to hijack your mind through algorithms, outrage, noise, and shallow validation, the one who remains aware of where his gaze rests wins. Think about it. You become what you repeatedly give your attention to, the headlines you obsess over, the approval you chase, the conflict you revisit in your head 100 times. These things aren't harmless. They're habits, and they quietly shape your identity. Marcus Aurelius said, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts. So if your thoughts are constantly scattered, your life will be. If your attention is constantly borrowed, your focus will vanish. And without focus, you lose not just time, you lose direction." So the Stoic trains his gaze, not just to look, but to see. He's not pulled into every notification. He doesn't click every headline. He doesn't react to every provocation. He chooses, and that choice becomes his advantage. You start to feel it the moment you reclaim your focus. Things that used to feel urgent suddenly feel empty. That argument, not worth your energy. That post, not worth your scroll. That person who used to live rent-free in your head. They don't get a key anymore. You stop leaking attention into places that don't build you. And it's not about becoming hard or closed off. It's about becoming deliberate. Because when you stop giving your attention to everything, you can finally give it to something. To what matters. To your craft. To your purpose. To your peace. To your presence. Most people are tired, not because they've done too much, but because they've paid attention to too much that gave them nothing back. Don't make the same trade. Don't confuse information with growth. Don't confuse stimulation with nourishment. Your mind is not a landfill, it's a temple. Treat it like one. And yes, people might feel your distance. Let them. That space you create isn't rejection, it's reclamation. You're not ignoring them, you're prioritizing you, your stillness, your clarity, your rise. So ask yourself every day, who or what is taking more of my mind than they've earned? And if you don't like the answer, change it, because attention is power, and power should never be given away by accident. 9. Make your presence feel like a privilege. You don't need to announce your worth. You don't need to prove it. You don't need to demand that others respect you, validate you, or choose you. The Stoic knows presence is earned, not by performance, but by alignment. And when you live in deep alignment with who you are and what you value, your presence becomes a force, not loud, not flashy, but undeniable. We've been taught to chase validation, to accommodate, to shrink our needs just to stay in the room. But when you start living by principle instead of popularity, everything shifts. You stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, am I honoring myself here? You stop twisting yourself into versions of you that fit someone else's expectations. You begin to realize your time, your energy, your attention, they're not obligations, they're offerings, and not everyone has earned them. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's the point. Embodiment, integrity. When you live from the inside out, when your words match your values, when your actions match your philosophy, people feel that. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to sell it. You are it. And suddenly, your presence starts to feel different. It carries weight. It calms the room. It makes people slow down, straighten up, think twice before they speak. Not because you demand it, but because you live it. This isn't arrogance, it's self-respect. And it's rare. Most people give away their presence cheaply, to gossip, to chaos, to anything that asks for it. But you begin to realize that the more you grow, the more selective you must become. Not everyone can sit with you in stillness. Not everyone deserves access to your attention. Not everyone knows what to do with presence that isn't performative, but rooted. And when you treat your presence like a privilege, people adjust. Those who take you for granted fade. Those who rise to meet your energy stay. Your relationships shift. Your conversations deepen. Your boundaries no longer feel like walls. They feel like standards. But this shift requires consistency. You can't half-embody presence. It's not a tactic. It's not about acting powerful. It's about becoming powerful in the way you wake up, in the way you speak, in the way you walk into a room and listen before you speak, in the way you no longer over-explain when someone doesn't understand you, because you don't need their approval to continue living in alignment. And yes, some people will be intimidated. Let them. They're not intimidated by you. They're challenged by the version of themselves they're not ready to meet. That's not your burden. You don't owe anyone a lighter version of your truth to make them comfortable. You owe yourself your full self, without apology. So live like your presence is sacred, because it is. Don't beg to be invited into rooms that require you to leave your integrity at the door. Don't stay in spaces where being overlooked is normalized. Don't chase connection at the cost of your inner authority. Instead, become the kind of person who is felt even in silence, whose absence is noticed because your energy carried weight, and whose presence, when given, feels like a gift. Because the highest form of power isn't what you say, it's who you are when you say nothing at all. 10. Outgrow people without announcement. Not every ending needs a speech. Not every evolution needs a confrontation. Growth is often quiet, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You begin to see things differently. What used to excite you now feels empty. What you once tolerated now feels like noise, and the people who fit your past, some of them no longer fit your present, but instead of fighting to explain or waiting for them to understand, the Stoic simply moves forward. Without noise, without drama, without regret. It's not that you stop caring, it's that you stop shrinking. You stop pretending you don't notice the disconnect. You stop rehearsing conversations that won't change anything. You stop editing yourself so others won't feel insecure. Because the truth is, you didn't change too much. You just started becoming who you really are, and not everyone is meant to meet that version of you. Outgrowing people is natural. It doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean you're better. It just means your values shifted, your vision deepened, your standards rose, and the more aligned you become, the more misalignment becomes obvious. You don't need to judge it. You don't need to resent it. You just need to respect it. Let the distance grow. Let the silence stretch. Let what no longer serves you fall away on its own. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." And often, the people who no longer align with your direction are not obstacles. They're signals. They're mirrors. They show you how much you've grown, and they teach you one of the hardest lessons: to walk away without needing to be right, to let go without needing closure. Because growth doesn't always come with celebration. Sometimes it comes with solitude. Sometimes it comes with misunderstanding. Sometimes it comes with walking a road that no one else is ready for yet. But the Stoic understands. Your peace matters more than their approval. Your path matters more than being liked. Your energy is too valuable to be spent explaining to people who are committed to misunderstanding your evolution. So you stop calling, stop chasing, stop trying to drag people into seasons they didn't choose. You don't block them out of spite. You don't leave with bitterness. You simply stop showing up in places where your soul feels small. You choose stillness over noise, progress over nostalgia, purpose over familiarity. And that's not cruelty, it's clarity. Over time, those who are meant for your frequency will find you again, and those who were only meant for a chapter will quietly fade. Let them. You don't need to carry everyone with you to prove you're loyal. You only need to stay loyal to your growth. So if you're feeling the space widen between you and those you once walked closely with, breathe. Let it widen. Let yourself move. You don't need to announce your departure to validate your direction. The Stoic does not explain his rise. He simply rises, not out of pride, but out of purpose. 11. Never beg for love, respect, or attention. There's a quiet desperation that settles in when you start chasing what should be freely given. You sense something is off, but instead of pulling back, you lean in. You soften your voice, you justify their silence, you rationalize their absence. You give more, hoping it will make them see you. And when they don't, you give even more. But no matter how generous your love is, or how pure your intention, what is not given freely becomes a cage. And the more you beg for it, the more you teach yourself that your worth depends on someone else's willingness to acknowledge it. The Stoic doesn't beg, not because he's cold, but because he understands the value of dignity, love, respect, attention. These are not luxuries. They are not trophies to be earned through self-erasure. They are reflections of alignment. And when you have to fight for them, when you have to constantly prove you deserve them, you're not in a relationship, you're in a transaction, and your soul can feel the difference. Seneca said, "If you wish to be loved, love. But that love must begin with the self, with a relationship rooted in integrity, a relationship where you know, deeply, unshakably, that you are enough as you are, not once you achieve more, not once you're seen more, not once you're quieter, cooler, easier to love, but now, in this moment. And that knowing, that's what allows you to walk away from what no longer recognizes your worth. When you beg for love, it stops being love. It becomes dependency. It becomes anxiety masked as loyalty. You're not hoping for connection. You're surviving in fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over. Fear that you won't be chosen again. And that fear makes you tolerate what you would have once walked away from. It makes you explain your pain again and again to someone who's not even listening. But the Stoic sees the trap. He knows that begging is not only a waste of time, it's a betrayal of the self. Because every time you beg, you tell yourself a subtle lie, that your value depends on external validation. And that lie, repeated long enough, becomes your inner voice. That's why the moment you stop begging is the moment your life begins to shift. You return to your own center. You realize that you don't have to beg for what's aligned. You don't have to audition for love. You don't have to earn basic human respect. These things, when real, flow. They move naturally toward you because your energy speaks for itself. Not in loud words, but in silent presence, in boundaries, in self-respect. And yes, you might lose people, the ones who only stayed because you gave endlessly, the ones who needed you to need them. Let them go. Your peace will thank you. Your future will thank you. Your true self, the one who waited patiently while you kept bending, will finally breathe again. From this place, love doesn't feel like performance. Respect doesn't feel like negotiation. Attention doesn't feel like reward. Everything becomes cleaner, simpler, quieter, and your heart, no longer busy trying to be chosen, becomes something that chooses itself. So the next time you feel yourself reaching out just to be seen, chasing just to be loved, explaining just to be respected, pause. Come back home. You were never meant to beg for what your soul already carries. And those who see that, they won't need convincing. 12. Be so focused on self-mastery that they feel ignored. There comes a point in your evolution when you stop turning your head every time someone calls your name. You stop explaining your silence. You stop apologizing for your focus. You no longer feel the need to check in, follow up, or make everyone comfortable with the fact that you're not as available as you used to be. And naturally, they'll start to notice. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant, that you've become selfish, maybe even cold. But what they're really feeling is your alignment, your clarity, your withdrawal from chaos. It's not that you're ignoring them, it's that you're finally listening to yourself. Self-mastery doesn't happen in public. It happens in solitude. It happens in the hours you give to your habits, your health, your inner work, while others scroll, gossip, or chase validation. It's built in the mornings you rise without applause, in the nights you stay in to sharpen your vision instead of being pulled into another distraction disguised as connection. And from the outside, yes, it might look like distance, but from the inside, it's peace, discipline, direction. The Stoic doesn't apologize for this. He doesn't explain why he's not answering every message, why he's not involved in every conflict, why he seems quieter than before. He knows that energy is currency and that mastery requires investment. And what you invest in daily is what you become. So if you're still handing your attention to everyone who expects it, your growth will always be delayed by their demands. Marcus Aurelius wrote, The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do. That's the essence of this principle. You don't owe your progress to anyone's understanding. You don't need to keep showing up in old conversations just because they're used to hearing from you. You don't need to water relationships that once mattered, but now no longer grow. You simply stay rooted. You build in silence, and let the results speak for themselves. This kind of focus will feel threatening to those who depended on your distraction, the ones who needed your attention to validate their own chaos. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your growth is. And it's not just about ignoring others, it's about ignoring what's irrelevant, the drama, the need to be seen, the pull to compare, the fear of missing out. You realize eventually that the world doesn't owe you a platform, and you don't owe the world a constant performance. You owe yourself the kind of life that only comes from deep, sustained attention to your mind, to your habits, to your inner standard. This is what separates the seeker from the master. The master doesn't chase approval. He doesn't chase visibility. He chases inner coherence. His actions, thoughts, and values align, and that alignment creates gravity. Not popularity, but power. The kind of power that needs no defense. The kind of power that others feel when you walk in a room, even if you say nothing at all. So let them feel ignored, not because you're unkind, but because you've remembered what matters. Let them sit with your absence. Let them wonder why you've gone quiet, because when the noise dies down, the message becomes clear. You didn't disappear. You just decided to grow. You don't become powerful by controlling others. You become powerful by mastering yourself, quietly, daily, in ways no one sees. There's a kind of presence that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek recognition, validation, or applause. It doesn't try to be noticed, and yet it changes rooms. It shifts dynamics. It invites respect without a single word. That presence is built in silence. It's forged in solitude. It's shaped by the decisions you make when no one is watching, to stay calm, to stay clear, to stay aligned. That's the path of the Stoic, not the one who never feels, but the one who refuses to be ruled by every passing emotion, not the one who hides in detachment, but the one who shows up with discipline, not the one who outshines, but the one who outlasts. Through principle, through presence, through peace. You'll be misunderstood. Let them misunderstand. You'll be called distant. Let them sit in their own noise. You'll lose people. Let them go. Because the deeper you go into yourself, the more refined your energy becomes, and the fewer people will be able to hold it. That's not a failure. That's the cost of becoming rare. So take everything you've heard here, and don't just think about it. Live it. In your stillness, in your speech, in your next breath, your next decision, your next moment of resistance. Let your boundaries speak. Let your silence carry weight. Let your life, not your noise, be the proof of who you are. And when the world pulls at your attention, return to yourself. When the noise gets loud, return to your focus. When others demand your energy, return to your peace. Because the one who lives from that place, unshaken, undistracted, undivided, is not just stoic. He is free.